And there it is. All right. Welcome back to welcome to 2024, actually, because I haven't really gone live very much this year. I am delighted to have my first conversation with another being be with Red this year because we are setting off the year powerfully with this conversation. And before we get into our conversation, I just want to do a couple little quick logistical updates, then we'll introduce ourselves and we'll get into our topic. So, last year I did a series of soul connection calls, and I realized that this became kind of a grab bag where we were tossing all kinds of topics into the same bucket. And I realized for viewers, it would be a lot easier if we could differentiate between the conversations. So I am delighted that Red Moon Eagle will be joining me ongoing throughout the year. We'll see how long it lasts. We'll see how many conversations we feel called to have. But we've already had two, and so this will be our third on what we're calling the Inner Tapestry series, where we're going into all things multidimensional frameworks and blueprints and stuff that is hard to articulate sometimes, the unseen and unknown in many ways. So if you find yourself here, that's what you're here to talk about, is sort of those unseen multidimensional elements. And I'm just so excited to have you back, Red, for the third time, and what's sounding like it's going to be at least a dozen more times.
Well, I appreciate being here, Safrianna. I love talking with you because you ask very clear questions that I can then articulate for other people. It just makes it so much easier.
It does. It really, our ability to respond with one another is, I think, like the next evolution of humanity and healing is the ability to just have open conversations and get curious about one another, right? It's not a one-sided conversation. So, thank you so much for being willing to do this with me. And let's
Happy to.
just go ahead and orient the audience in case they are finding us for the first time. Red, if you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, my name is Red MoonEagle, and I am a healer's healer, a psychic catalyst, teacher. I have been doing this kind of work my whole life. So we are just now seeming to come into a world, a time, a space, a dimension that I can talk about this and be heard. And it's an amazing place to be. And I'm so excited to have the whole world, the whole community of world, all of our brothers and sisters to come into a place where we can talk about this stuff.
Absolutely. Yes. You you are a very old soul with a lot of wisdom to share, and you are absolutely right that the collective has not been fully prepared to have some of these conversations until very recently. And I'm excited that we're stepping into that. We all are here at this time on this timeline for a reason, and having these conversations, expanding our internal worldview is a huge part of that. So,
Yeah.
um, I'm Safrianna Luna. I go by the Queer Spirit Guide, and I'm CEO of Living Luna. And I am also a healer's healer, but not so much a catalyst as just a guide. I don't really stir stuff up. I just get with you in the shadows and see what we need to walk through. But both
Mm,
energies are needed, right? Like we
yes.
play different roles and we're complementary, and that's before we get into our actual topic today, I just want to say this one little thing, which is that we're moving away from the paradigm of competition. Thank goodness. Because we
Mm.
all have a valuable gift to share. We all have important wisdom to share. There is not a single human on this planet that you can compare to any other human on this planet because we all are so different. And so I love being able to share the similarities and differences we have as healers and know that we're not competing with one another. We're cheering each other on and we're supporting each other in our gifts, which I just think is so cool.
It's impactful and it's dynamic, and I too am very so grateful and so blessed that the competition paradigm is slowly being taken apart,
Hmm.
because that paradigm is toxic, and it's toxic to anybody being able to grow.
Absolutely. So, talking about everyone's unique, today we're going to talk about the Four Sisters. And
Four
this is
sisters.
Oh my goodness, Red. The Four Sisters. When you told me this concept, I, of course, I'm a skeptic. I check everything. I
Yep.
sit with it. I make sure it feels right for me. And when you first introduced me to the concept of the Four Sisters, it was like 50% of it, I was like, oh my God, yes, this makes so much sense. And then 50% of it, I was like, wait a minute, like, wait a hot minute. And I had to take a full step back. And since I have not been able to refute any of it, like my beingness is like, yes, the Four Sisters, this is a thing, this is the mission you came in on, and it sure as heck explains my obsession with the four classical elements as a child. So
Yep.
tell us what the Four Sisters are.
So I'm not entirely certain where to start because normally when I start with the Four Sisters, it's in relation to someone's blueprint.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody has come from there or lived lives on one of the Four Sisters or all Four Sisters. And there's a lead-in thread. Their guides give me the lead-in thread, and then I can kind of preface it with, bear with me, and here we go on the ride. And the irony with that is that when someone's been to one of the Four Sisters or all four of them, including Earth, right? There is a resonance that once they know that, the paradigm of acceptance shifts and they're able to settle into their chosen path in this life so much better. And I've seen that happen with you. You went from, huh, to, oh, and oh, and oh. So what the Four Sisters are, and I'm gonna kind of go with uh, this angle, and tell me, Safrianna, if you'd like me to go in another angle. But
Absolutely.
as Astra comes and sits in my lap,
I know.
my
I was like,
beautiful.
hi, Astro.
um, so the Four Sisters is Earth and her three sister planets, and the oldest of the sisters is the water planet, and Earth herself is the fire planet, and she's the baby sister, and she's the youngest of them all. And so she has a lot of helpers here on Earth within her realm that help her as she's growing. And the oldest sister is the water planet. I've had a couple people ask me, "Is that the planet that was destroyed?" I have no idea where they get that from. I have no idea where that piece of information comes from. But her older sister still exists. Trust me, I think I'd know.
I have
Um,
theories on this, which we can get into later after we get the
okay.
top down overview.
The second oldest sister is the Earth sister, and the Earth sister is has a heavier gravity than Earth. Um, Horses, what we think of as horses, come from there. Whales and dolphins come from the water planet. The legends of mer people come from the water planet. All of these legends, they have a real anchoring, and it's not a ethereal anchoring. It's a real touch it, feel it, taste it, see it, smell it anchoring. And then you have the air planet, and the air planet is where eagles come from, where the legends of the Thunderbird come from. Um, the air planet is very different from the other two, where it's more of a crystalline type structure. Many things have a very crystalline structure to them.
Hmm.
They have plants and stuff, but their plants don't look like our plants. They have more of a crystalline structure to them on the outside versus if we think of like our myofascial system has a crystalline structure to it in our bodies, but you don't see it. And the air planet, everything's crystalline structure shows, I guess is a good way of describing it. Um, and then Earth herself is the fire planet, and her first lifeblood was not water. Her first lifeblood was lava, was silica. And it wasn't until she grew to a place where her older sisters sent entities to this planet that we started having other elemental representations as she has gone through her dimensional shifts and growing. And the dimensional shift that everybody likes to talk about, new Earth, right? I'm going to use that in quotation marks, is very much where Earth herself is choosing to go through this dimensional awareness paradigm, for lack of a better word. And she is doing it with conscious connection to entities from across the universe who have come here to help her do that with conscious awareness. And it's the first time she's done it this way. Prior to this, she's always basically turned herself inside out like a sock, for lack of a better term. And life has gone back to very basic before repopulation and reseeding
Yeah.
to uh, create that evolutionary unfolding of consciousness. Does that answer the baseline?
Yeah, and just to summarize that again, like really, really simple high level, the Four Sisters describes this cluster of four planets, not together physically,
No.
but scattered. I like to call it
Mm-hmm.
elsewhere.
Elsewhere.
Elsewhere, uh, that are in this sort of, would you call it almost like a karmic relationship? Like their story is together. The
Their
four
story
planets, the
is
four sisters.
together, but they are within the nine dimensions. So outside the nine dimensions is something else that I don't even know how to explain. But within the nine dimensional realms of evolution, for lack of a better word, there is a connectedness between the four sisters because there's also this other place that is called council. And again, it's kind of another one of those things that not sure how deep to go with that, but council is very much in connection to how the sisters are growing, right? And I've had people ask me, are the Pleiades where the water planet is Sirius where the Earth planet? I don't have answers to these questions. I don't know, because I know that all four sisters are within the nine dimensions, but I don't have the answer to the question. Are they all in our same plane? Are
That's
they dimensionally next to it? Are they in the fifth dimension? Are they in the seventh dimension? I don't know. I
yeah.
don't have answers to those questions. Um, Pretty much every time I try to get clarity, guides are very adamant that that is not the question to ask right now. We have to get the baseline out there. So that's
Yeah.
basically what I've been told for years. You
Yeah.
keep talking about what we tell you to talk about, and when you're ready to know more, we'll let you know.
I mean, the guides are like that sometimes. So it's really interesting that you say that because again, like I've just been sitting with, wow, this is new information to me. The Four Sisters in consciousness was not
Mm-hmm.
communicated to me until June of 2023. So it's not been that long in the scheme of things. And I have sat with my own soul level memories because of that, because I have had lives on all four planets,
Mm-hmm.
and been there for various different stages, and some of those memories have come back. And I have had a sense, so, I feel like this is very controversial in the starseed community. So I just want to
Yes,
say a little bit about that because, yes, people want to know, oh, is this in Pleiades? Is this Arcturus? Is this here? Is this there? We can't 100% know. But the sisters' planets, their names, can we get into that?
sure.
Because that's the controversy, right?
Oh, that's the controversy. Oh, that's the
That's the
controversy.
controversy, and this is where I get into what has come through for me that sits as my truth that I would ask other people to sit with. So, the water planet, to my belief, is Mintaka. Also, I think known as Mu. And then there's a bunch,
Yeah,
you've heard it as different names.
yeah. It comes through as different names depending on who I'm talking to. The irony is that I've heard Mintaka fairly frequently in the last 2 years, but I'm always a little hesitant to say yes because I don't know. I don't know how the translation of the sound of the name of the water planet. To me, it sounds like whale song in my head.
Right, right.
I
Yeah,
have
like,
I have no way to articulate that sound.
you mean you don't
Um,
want to imitate a whale and do your very best?
well, mostly I don't want to do the name injustice, and I don't
Right,
have a
right.
translation. I don't have a Rosetta Stone for it, right?
Right.
Um,
So water planet
and
is the easy
the
one.
the Earth planet has come through fairly frequently by guides themselves telling people to tell them it's probably just Lemuria. Just tell them that.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, I get a little bit of kickback and the controversy kicks in, right? Like the attachment.
Yes.
And then the air planet across the board, every single guide, every single time, the translation comes through is Earth Legends of Atlantis.
Hmm.
And there is a whole story with that I knew nothing about until probably about 5 years ago. I did an 8 hour download session for somebody. I will never do that again, just FYI. But I walked away with so much information that I was shell shocked, to tell
I
you
can
honestly.
imagine.
I didn't know, understand, because I knew that in my life, I have heard all of these different legends and I have gone, something's wrong with the perception of it, right?
Right.
The myth is real. The the memories are not wrong, but they're misplaced, or they're wrong in the wrong direction. And I could never really put my finger on what was wrong with it, right? Because we have true memory stories and we have skewed true memory stories, and we've got just fiction, right? Like they're all kind of woven in together. And the Atlantean stories have been, and the Lemurian ones, they've both been somewhat, I don't disbelieve, but I also just don't understand why my knee jerk response is, something's wrong with that. So to walk away from that download session and have all of this clarified in a way that I had never thought of, perceived, had an inkling was what I was missing, creates a lot of controversy. And I have had some people that outright are like, nope.
Yeah. I mean, I was there for a little bit. I was like, I don't know. And then because it did challenge everything that I'd ever been told. Most of us believe Atlantis is somewhere under the ocean, and same with Lemuria. And every time I sat with that, I had that same, like, something's slightly
Mhm.
wrong here. And my current theory that I was hinting at earlier is, one, I think the water planet has moved to another dimension than this one, which
She's
is
the older
why,
sister,
right, she's got the most advanced abilities, right? And I
right?
think that there was I think we've gone through as souls so many cataclysmic events. This universe is just like this grinder, right? Like, oh my gosh, this particular universe really seems to be based on a lot of duality and push and pull
Yes,
energy. So,
yes,
I kind of think that the eldest sister was like, peace, we're gonna kind of exit some of this main plane of existence. That's my
yeah.
theory. And that the souls were remembering. So, the theory that I've sat with is that I think Lemuria was a place on Earth temporarily after a bunch of souls fled Lemuria after that event. And so there was this soul level memory that we collectively kind of held, and then it came into language here, but it wasn't the original. That's my sense of it when I sit with it. But I know most people are still with the, like, no, it is here and that's it.
Yeah, it's a whole nother place though, and
Right.
that's where it's really hard to get across to people that the Earth sister, and this is why I try to skew away from saying Lemuria all the time,
Right.
because I'm trying to help people understand that the Earth sister has a denser gravity. She's got a denser planetary core.
Cooler.
There's it's yeah, it's like a totally different place. Um, and every once in a while, guides give me little glimpses, and I have no words for it. But I will tell you that the first time I understood that the four sisters were very separate things, I went somewhere and there were horses, and there was a horse that came right up to me, and it's the horse that nobody could get near, came right up to me, bumped me on the shoulder, looked me right in the eye, and I swear to God, he goes, "You figured it out. Good girl." I basically got a, here's your cookie.
From a horse.
So
Oh man, for most humans that would be like, "Oh gosh, I've gone completely bonkers." But for the intuitive, it's like, "Oh, cool, level
oh,
up. Great."
yay. But it also brings into this reflection of understanding that once I understood, it settles much better. Like, it doesn't mean Lemurians haven't been here, or the Earth, her Earth sisters entities have not come here. Clearly, we have them.
Mhm.
Horses are still here. You know, like, there we have entities that have seeded into Earth herself, uh, in connection, right, to the entities that are already here, right? And her big sisters are always helping her grow. I mean, that's what big sisters do. Um, I do wonder if the water planet hasn't stepped into another dimension, but I also have gotten a really strong sense from some fairly recent intuitive uh, dives that Lemuria and Atlantis, or the water sister and the earth sister and the air sister, are somehow at least seemingly a little closer.
Mhm. That's that's been my sense too, since I've been very public about this since that I discovered myself to be an extra dimensional being with another body that is currently actively alive,
Oh yeah.
on the Earth planet, and
Oh yeah.
sitting with the duality that I do feel between those two places, and a lot more information has started to come through. I like to joke now. I'm like, I decided, okay, I actually decided to come to Earth because I was a really, really bad overworker, and I had this soul level belief. That's the actual answer, of why I came here, is because I thought I needed to
Mm.
do it all, and we've forgiven ourselves for that now, but I now joke that I came here for the hot food
Oh
because,
yeah.
like,
Food's awesome.
the Earth planet's food is like nuts and seeds and berries, is what I get the sense of, and maybe
Yeah.
occasionally some boiled tea, but like, we don't really do the
There.
fire thing there. I don't get the sense.
No. And of the planets, the sisters, it is the vegetarian sister. For lack of a better way of describing, like, I have run into Earth entities that are so shocked with the idea they have to eat meat in this physical flesh that they have a visceral, like, absolute visceral distaste. And when they anchor in the body, they do a little bit better. You know, like, they anchor in and they do a little bit better with the meat consumption, protein, or at least finding a better way of doing that for themselves. But so often I find that they have a hard time with eating meat. It's
And
just a thing.
that's me, right? Like, it was when I was 14 or 15, I had this conscious, like, wait a minute, what are we doing? And like, I couldn't bring myself to eat meat for a long time until my father literally starved me and was like, you're gonna eat the meat again, or you're gonna get spinach for the rest of your life, and that's all you eat. So I literally had to be forced to eat meat. Like,
Yep.
and that's that kind of stuff again, like, the more little glimmers that come through and I just get little tidbits of information, the more lines up and makes sense.
Oh yeah. And the other thing about the Earth planet and the water planet specifically is that when you are born as an entity into a body there's an automatic telepathic connection to the sister planet's consciousness, whatever planet you're on. Now, the air planet, for eons, from what I understand, that was not the case. It was a choice. Like, basically, once you hit puberty, or the equivalent of puberty, because it's not directly a straight line, on the air planet, you could either choose to have that telepathic connection or you could choose not to. And they had this big war. It was a big thing. It's basically the equivalent of a cataclysmic event, because the air planet had never had a cataclysm. That's just how she grew. She didn't have these cataclysmic events like her dear younger fire sister. So until that great war, there was always a choice. You know, you could hit your adulthood and choose that telepathic connection or not. Earth, this fire planet, this fire elemental, she has never had telepathic connection as an option up until recently. Like, and I say recently as in the last, going into this next cataclysm, there is this choice starting to build to have this telepathic connection with her. But I think it's just part of this planetary consciousness growth cycle. I'm getting a very distinct impression that all the sisters have kind of gone through these dimensional shifts and these growing, because they are themselves a sentient entity.
Mhm.
And to have a telepathic connection when you're born on the earth planet, you automatically have a telepathic connection, or you're born into the water planet, you automatically have a telepathic connection. You already know in a way that you know, and you carry that memory, and you're carrying a duality life. So you have a telepathic connection with the earth, the earth elemental sentient entity planet on that life, in that life that you're living at a dual consciousness here. And here you don't have that, but yet you feel like somehow you should be able to. Like there's this
It's
this
quite confusing.
disconnect. It is very confusing. So there's a physiological body response, I think, that happens with those who are living dual lives at on one of the four sisters that can create this dissonance. And you've talked about that dissonance, that trying to figure out what this dissonance is, and knowing about the four sisters brought some of that dissonance out of this place of no cohesion into a place of cohesion, where you can follow the vibrational flow. Now it's like, oh, now I'm not fighting to look for something that's not here. The other part of me is somewhere else, and she is beautiful and she's amazing and she's living this wonderful life.
Little hobbit life.
And huh?
Said little hobbit life.
Yes, yes, a little hobbit life. And also coming into cohesion and vibrational frequency of understanding that sometimes people, when they're looking for something, they're looking through some of these histories of these other places that have full histories. And the Earth planet um, has never, the water planet and the Earth planet, as far as I know, as far as guides have told me, there haven't been any huge like cataclysms, but they have had turbulence of some kind. And the air planet is the one that has had the worst war ever, like
Right.
biological warfare, mass exodus, where truly and surely spacecraft traveled from there to their baby sister, the fire planet. So we have had, yes, extraterrestrial visitors from other places, yes. And yes, they were from the air planet. There's a reason why the legends are the way they are, but we're not. I caution people, this is where that controversy comes up again. Everybody's looking for this whole other place that is coming from genuine memories of being from somewhere else. Your, what I call a true form, like when your soul comes into its very first awareness of soulness, I guess. Um, you can incarnate out of that and go into 5 million other places in the universe, or you can stay in your true form. And when you come here in your true form and you visit here in your true form and you die here, and you might get a little karma and get trapped in this weird place of baby sister and all this shit. Yeah, it can be really confusing. I imagine that the whole idea of getting trapped here, and as Earth herself is going through this dimensional shift and awakening and of awareness, you're going to want to start looking for home. That totally makes sense.
Right.
It's,
Yeah.
I think of it as the analogy of you're 3 years old and your mom and dad get you in a car and you drive somewhere and you go to grandma and grandpa's house, and then all of a sudden you're living there and you have these vague memories of home, and then maybe mom and dad die in a car accident, you're living with these strange people, and maybe your grandma and grandpa, uh something happens to them and you end up living with somebody else. Like, this could be like the soul having lived all these different lifetimes, but yet you have this vague, fuzzy, knowing memory that you're not from here and you belong somewhere else. So now we're going to go look under the ocean for it because that's the last place we can look for it, right?
Right. This desire, right? We're in the discomfort and we want to know that we're right, that we're not crazy for remembering another home. And this is, coming out of the mental health field and starting to talk about these very woo things, right?
Yes,
Like
yes,
bringing this down to earth for people that many of us have these experiences and you're not crazy for having them. But it's
no,
been so suppressed and so not talked about. And there when it is talked about, it's often talked about as one size fits all. This is the answer. You're not allowed to think about it.
right.
And so I love having these conversations where we're like, yeah, this is like there are a lot of people that experience this longing for home. And chances are, if you keep digging around here for it, you're not going to find it. But what if it was simply beyond reach? Yes, that'd be
Yeah,
uncomfortable, but what would that mean for you? Could you accept
right,
this as your new home?
right. And that's a real thing in a touch it, feel it, taste it, see it, smell it reality, right? Like thinking back about if you were that person, that 3-year old, like, well, maybe that house doesn't exist anymore. Maybe the town was raised by a nuclear bomb. Like I'm using drastic examples, but you see what I mean? Like
Yep.
you have to be able to shift a little bit. And one of the things that I have found with entities that are from the air planet, when they start diving into the memories, there's often a huge amount of trauma. There's biological warfare that happened in that war. There was genocide that happened in that war. There was experimentation that happened in that war. They
Hmm.
brought a lot of that technology here.
Right.
And at the same time that they brought it here, they were unprepared for uh, what they encountered when they were here. And once the treaties were signed and the war ended, many of them had the opportunity to go back home. But once they were caught in this fear paradigm, it was very heavy and they were not familiar and they weren't comfortable coming out of it. So we do have, for lack of a better term, many kind of lost, forgotten entities that are from there that don't realize they don't need to be lost. Like all they
Right.
have to do is wake up and their sister, their home, their air planet home is still there. It still exists. It's not lost. It's not buried under some ocean. It's not this other thing. Um, I mean, one interesting thing from my own experiences when I was a very young child and growing up, I've always had these glimpses of the sisters in different facets and not realizing, oh, okay, I get it now. But it's always been this every time somebody's talked about the air planet using these words like Atlantis, there is an image in my head that is always the same every single time. And it's not the same sky. It doesn't have the same sky. It can't be the same place because it doesn't have the same sky. I can look in the memory, I look up and I can see different stars, there's two moons. There's two moons that encircle the air planet.
Mm,
It's
that lands. Yep.
it's got I have very clear images that when I was younger I didn't understand, like, why do I get the same image every single time somebody mentions it? And okay, well, whatever. And once that download and all the stories came through, it was like, oh, I get it now. Okay.
Yeah, a lot of this is bringing up when you said earlier that there was a time in which there were beings fleeing or coming on over from the air planet via spacecraft. I've had a lot of these images of early humanity being seated in that way.
Oh yeah.
or integrated with in that way, and that
Oh yeah.
totally makes sense. Um,
They
because
weren't they weren't the only ones that
right,
see it, but because of that war was so cataclysmic
yes,
and so awful
and they
that
brought that energy in.
they brought that refugee energy in with all that trauma. And the interesting part about what guides have told me over and over and over again about this, and always from a different angle. It's like every download I get a different guide with a different angle from the same thing. So it's starting to take this amazing shape that I am flabbergasted that I've been shown this. But one of the big things is that when they came here, they asked permission. Earth herself, her consciousness, gave permission to her older sister. Yes, send me your sick, send me your traumatized. I have these amazing earth entities, these amazing beings that are here, and we will help you. And those that were here thought that they were prepared. They were prepared for the trauma. They thought they were truly prepared for this. And the first the first I'd say roughly, if you were to add time to it, the first 100 years not so bad. Not too bad. Everything was kind of fine. But then you had these entities that were being born in rather than just traveling,
Hmm.
right? So there's this dimensional connection between Earth, our Earth, Gaia, fire element, and her older sisters. And so once she accepted that dimensional gift, like I will take you're sick, you're hungry, you're weak, you're traumatized, I will take them. She was taking them dimensionally too. So beings then being born through into human vessels, for lack of a better term. And the entities that were birthing them were not ready for that second wave. The second wave was so much worse than the first wave. The first wave that came through were coming here in spaceships. Some of them were being born, but those were not the ones who had the worst kind of trauma,
Hmm.
basically. It was the second wave and the third wave, and it changed culture here. Like the fundamental memories that were being brought from civilizations that were and are technically way ahead of us in so many ways, but they have that trauma. They have that genocidal manipulation of DNA and bio warfare. Like they have these awful, awful. And I've been shown images that I have no idea what it is I'm looking at, and it was so traumatic that one of the things that big influx of refugees over a period of about 1,000 years, what that seemed to have done is triggered Earth herself into another dimensional cataclysmic shift. And she went, uh oh. And there was that's the last cataclysm.
Hmm.
And I use that loosely. And so there is this interconnection dimensionally between the four sisters, and how one event somewhere else in a totally different place has triggered this other thing. And so many are waking up in a different way, and they're waking up in a way as she's shifting into this new dimensional awareness, that they're waking up where they're having to deal with their trauma. They can't not deal with it and still move forward.
Yep, we're having
It's
mass awakenings right now with shadow work.
oh yeah,
Mass
but
awakenings.
but this post dark time is exactly the way she's been warning us for a while that it was going to happen. At least my
Right.
whole lifetime I've known about it. Like I don't know if anybody else is waking up, but I knew it was coming. I just wasn't sure what it would look like for sure.
Well, and we're gonna keep figuring that out over the next few years. I have a sense. Comment. I'm
Oh
awake now. Holy shit. Yup.
yeah. Oh
Can't
yeah.
you can't unwake up. That's that's
No.
the thing with this is like if you're watching this and you're like, Oh my god. Then
So
maybe there's something with this and your soul lineage.
yes. So there's another layer of this that I love. I love when, so I have a particular person I'm thinking of, and this particular person came to me, and this person, we were talking about the water planet and just this huge resonance, like, oh my God, yes. And came back a couple times, told me all these stories of remembering from the water planet, which I was just so tickled about because I was like, cool, tell me more because I don't know these things. And they went away for quite some time. And recently kind of came back and they were like in this place of connecting pieces of why her blueprint is written around so many water elements, right?
Mm,
Like in astrology. And the cool thing about astrology is sometimes astrology is written into your blueprint to give you that validating momentum and to give you information, right? But not everybody has astrology that's connected into their blueprint. It's kind of like a happenstance. Like it's kind of relevant, sort of, but not really. Um, so it's very interesting when that does coincide and give the validation of here, your sign. We've been giving you the little hints all along the way. And interestingly enough, not all air planet people are heavily air planeted in astrology. That doesn't seem to correlate. But the passion and the absolute fixation on finding home is usually an indicator that yes, that is somewhere that they are from. And
yeah.
it's important to honor that and also honor the memories of that trauma and how it bubbles up in their life now.
Yeah. And that's, that has been kind of coming back to me as we've been talking is not only do we have generational trauma and ancestral bloodline trauma,
Yes.
but those of us who are star seeds or have come in and seeded from elsewhere, we may also be carrying with us not just this particular body's lineage trauma, but
Yep.
also soul level lineage trauma from other places that is factoring in ways that we don't even begin to think about in the day
Right.
to day. And so, can we be more compassionate with how freaking complex this human existence is?
It's really complex in a way that I would like to throw out there that it is complex, but it's also a lot simpler than people think it is. Like, I will use the Four Sisters as a really good example. I have talked to people that are extraordinarily fixated that, again, the controversy, like, they are going to look for these places because they're fixated on it. The trauma is giving them that fixation, which I
Mhm.
totally understand that. I don't want to dismiss it,
Right.
but they want it to be really complicated. They want it to be really complicated why they're trapped here and their purpose is to find the magical grid of the crystal that's connected to the thing to the other thing that's this. It doesn't have to be such a tight knit woven thread that you end up with a knot. It's actually, wow, that's an interplay. It's actually more like a web of beauty and intricacy and dynamic interweaving, and it isn't a knot. It's not a tight knot. It's this loose connection and framework of intersection, and it's a beautiful thing. And it's not scary. It's not evil. It's not little green men under the Denver airport going to come punish you if you're not aware of something. Like I feel like I spend so much time untangling the fear-based paradigm. And in all of the things I've learned about the Four Sisters, I will use oldest sister and her seated entities that are here, and think about the very wise ancient whales that share generations of stories through their song in the water. And if you've ever had the opportunity to swim with whales or dolphins, I will tell you that if you just listen, they're sharing ancestral seeded information with us that are living within the realm of her baby sister, the fire planet. And there's an amazing grace and positive place of peace is what I call it. There's no fear in there. There's no place for fear. There's nowhere for that to live. And there's so much fear built into warnings and these ideas. And I it's not that it's not that people don't do bad things, right? It's that if you sit in that place of fear, you can't heal if you just sit in it and wallow in it in mud.
Yes.
It just you can't get anywhere with that.
Duality, not one side or the other, but the flowing
Correct. The flow.
between. That's and I think that might be one of our next topics that we're gonna talk about is like the shadow and the light and the duality. And
Yes.
that just seems to exist across this universe when I kind of tap into what are this universe's laws. This particular universe very duality based. And yes,
Yeah.
wallowing is different than allowing, right?
Yeah.
When we sit in the fear and we're with it, it's different than allowing it to take over and run the show. It really
Yeah.
is. I just wrote about this today, right? Like I walk
Yeah.
everywhere with fear as my friend instead of as
Hmm.
this like I have to stay trapped in it. And so whatever this brings up for you today, I invite you to sit with that. Of course, thank you to everyone who's been chatting with us this whole time. But if you're watching the replay and like a question's coming up or there's something more you want us to speak on, like we've been called into this work and we're here to share and to know that we're not doing this alone.
Yeah. And I think the other piece is that talking about the Four Sisters has been an amazing dynamic exploration of untangling the fear based mythos. And it's been a difficult, controversial conversation to have with those entities that are from there. And I've been able to help some when they're in that place, right? But sometimes they're not in that place. They're caught in that karmic loop and they can't quite get out of it. And we don't have to be there. We don't have to be in that karmic loop. We can choose to step out. And I really think that I've been asked several times, like you even did, Safrianna. You asked me, you're like, where do I go find more about the four sisters? And I'm like, well, I haven't figured out how to write about it yet.
We're going to write about it at some point, I'm sure. We'll be talking about it more.
Well, because it is taking this not complex thing. It's really not complex. The four sisters are not complex. They're very straightforward. The problem is that you're taking a very straightforward, not complex thing that guide after guide after guide have reinforced, and we're untangling something that's been made very complex.
Yeah.
And that has a tendency to throw people a little bit. But isn't it more complex than this? Isn't it more complicated than this? And I'm like, but no, it's really not.
We're used to making things more complicated than they need to be because of the current system, right? Talking about the trauma that exists here, right? Just complex. Yes, Bobby, there is no Google foo you can do about this. It's us right now talking about this, and
You
that's
know,
where there's the controversy.
it's very interesting. When I was a child and I was living with my grandmother, she had a psychic reading done by somebody, and she came home and she sat down and she was really upset from the psychic reading. And I'm sitting in the living room and I know she's upset, but I can't figure out why she's upset. And I'm playing something with cards on the floor because I had learned how to do a reading from playing cards. I was not allowed to do that with tarot cards at first. It was only playing cards. And out of nowhere, she goes, "Do you know about Atlantis?" I was in fifth grade. It was my very first ever experience with anybody bringing it up. And I remember looking at her and going, "Well, yeah, it's a pretty place." Because that image came into my head, right? Like I could see this image of this sky. It's a totally different color, these two moons. It's this glimpse of a wake of it's a beautiful place. And grandma looks at me very puzzled and she goes, "What do you mean it's a beautiful place?" And I told her, I said, "Well, I see two moons and a beautiful sky, and the stars are different than us." And I remember telling her that my guides were showing me what to explain to her. And I didn't go very deep. I was only in fifth grade, and she was always really good at like sideswiping me with questions. Like, um, and and time goes by, and out of nowhere, I don't know, I think I was like 18, 19 years old, and she asked me again. She goes, "Have you heard about this place Atlantis?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I've researched a little bit about that, grandma. I don't think they have that right, and I don't know why I don't think they have that right." And grandma tells me, she goes, "You're gonna have to explain it to people because they've got it wrong." And that's the only thing she's ever said.
Wow.
And she passed away this last year in 2023, but it's the only time she's ever been willing to talk about Atlantis. Like, they've got it wrong. You need to tell people why they have it wrong. And I'm like, huh? Like I'm 18. Whatever. Because it wasn't on the radar, but it's because started to become on the radar about 5 years ago. But I just don't know. And Safrianna, you're a blessing because you're helping me figure out how to get it untangled in a better way rather than just one person at a time in a blueprint.
Yes, and that's the prompting and the responding that's so essential that we were talking about earlier. Now, remind me if you're willing to share, are you from the Four Sisters?
No,
No, you just have been called into sharing this information, and now I've sort of gotten roped in because I am from the Four
you
Sisters
are.
and
You
actively
are.
from the Four Sisters.
Yes. You know, I figured this out a long time ago, Safriana, that I apparently one of the things that I'm supposed to do is just untangle stuff, get everything straightened out, so y'all can carry it onward and do your own thing.
A
Like
catalyst for understanding.
yep, my
I
three
saw
life
that.
themes. Yeah, my three life themes, and two of them are teacher and catalyst. So I'm not allowed to get out of this, no matter how much I squirm.
Well,
I
I am
think,
here to hold
you
this
know.
with you. So we're not doing it
Thank you.
alone.
I appreciate it. I do think that the understanding of the Four Sisters is really really important because I've called my business elemental anything for years and years and years because I've known that the elements themselves and how they balance out here are fundamentally tied to how Earth herself as a fire element feeds into them. And that's what creates this seeded environment that is so dimensionally dynamic. Are you coming back? You are coming back. Okay. We're not talking about your seeds yet. Not yours.
Yet.
Oh
We
my
will,
goodness.
Astro, we will.
I think oh her ear she heard you.
She's like, "You're gonna talk about me?" Yes.
Yes. She
Saw
wants
that
it.
tail.
Yeah. She doesn't usually like to sit when I talk in podcasting or Zoom because she can't see where the other people are. But this is the first time she sat through pretty much a whole thing. Like, are you going to talk about it yet? Are you going to talk about it yet?
Well, we're just planting lots of seeds for future conversations.
Yes,
So,
we are.
if there was anything in particular that you're more curious about from this episode, please let us know so that we can talk more about that. I would love to have a future conversation about elemental healing in general because I'm creating my whole own therapy healing framework around the
Mhm.
elements. And that's like, yeah, we need to talk a lot about that. We're going to talk about shadow and light. I'm sure we're going to talk more as, again, response, right? Responding to us and giving us your thoughts and feelings helps us kind of go back in and look at it from other angles. So all of our
Oh yeah,
perspectives are valuable. Every
always.
blueprint is unique.
They all are. And I've seen some pretty interesting varieties. I get asked all the time, like, when are you going to write a book about what blueprints are? And I went, well, maybe when the left fielders quit hitting me upside the head with a sledgehammer, that'd be great.
When you feel like you kind of have figured out the actual full framework, but when you keep adding to the framework, it's hard to teach it. So there's
It
that.
is hard to teach it. I do have a baseline. I'm getting closer, but getting this baseline information out and getting people to ask questions like, what more do you want to know, so that those questions can be answered and we can flush that out, because this untangling requires people asking those key questions
Yep.
to help. It's very much like when I'm talking to my guides. If somebody asks a question, they will answer that question, and sometimes they answer the question way too full for me to answer it. So a very specific question helps narrow what the guides answer. So it's, instead of a fire hose, I get a trickle that makes sense.
Yes.
Um, and that's why I'm really eager for these talks, to be able to get that trickle going so we can get more of this information out that's
Yes.
untangled from the fear paradigm that doesn't really belong.
Yeah. Oh, we're going to keep uncoupling that. That's important work. So,
Oh yeah,
thank you so much for this conversation today, Red. I know we will be back next week.
next
Slightly
week.
different time on the live, but these are available in replay. So enjoy. Let us know if you watched the replay and if you have those very specific keyed in questions. I know I'm exactly the same way. When someone actually asks me a question, the answer comes in. So Astro is so excited. I love this. Well, goodbye, Astro. Goodbye, Red. Goodbye, everyone. We will see you again soon. Thank you so much for joining.